There are moments where a story stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like a door opening right in front of you. The second release feels like one of these moments. Not because it gives us every answer, it doesn't, but because it gives us something powerful. Official evidence that this mystery is real enough to be recorded, preserved, released, and still sitting in front of us with no simple ending. And if you've been following this topic for years, you already know that this didn't start today. You've felt it. You've watched the language change. You've watched the laughter fade. You've watched the subject move from fringe documentaries into congressional hearings, military releases, government portals, whistleblower claims, and now official case files that are no longer buried in the dark. So tonight I don't want to talk to you like this is brand new. You're smarter than that. A lot of you have been following this trail for decades. You already know there's more coming. The real question is not, is there more? The real question is, where is this taking us? Because if the files continue opening, this story may not stop at strange objects in the sky. It may lead into beings. It may lead into non-human intelligence. It may lead into consciousness. It may lead into interdimensional knowledge. It may lead into a completely different understanding of what reality is and what we are inside it. And no, we're not going to pretend we have all of that proven tonight, but we are going to do something more exciting. We are going to look at the evidence we do have and ask what kind of tomorrow it might be pointing toward. Because release number 2 is not just a list of clips, it's a trail. And tonight, you and I are walking it together. This episode is a countdown from number 15 to number 1. But I don't want you to think of it as a normal list. Think of it like walking down a hallway where every door opens to a slightly bigger version of the same mystery. At first it looks like shapes, then behavior, then military environments, then formations, then history, then shootdowns, then water. And once water enters the story, the whole thing expands. Because suddenly we're not just talking about what's above us, we're talking about what's around us, what's beneath us, what might be moving through domains we barely understand. Sky, sea, space, maybe even something stranger. Because this release deserves more than a quick reaction, I've put together the release number 2 Decoded companion pack for our subscribers. It has the full countdown, direct evidence links, QR codes, visual reconstructions, and a deeper case-by-case breakdown. You can grab it at existenceunknown.com in the links section after this episode. But for now, keep the lights low, stay with me, and let's open the file. We begin at number 15. At number 15, we start with a case that may look small at first, but it does something important. It reminds us that the unknown does not always arrive in a clean shape. This one is described as cigar-shaped or fast spherical. And that wording alone tells us something. Even at the level of official description, the object resists easy language. Is it long? Is it round? Is it moving so fast its shape becomes difficult to judge? Is the sensor catching something real but imperfectly? That uncertainty is part of the evidence. Because when we talk about UAP, we're not just talking about things that look strange. We're talking about recorded events that were unusual enough to survive the system. Someone saw this. Someone captured it. It was retained and it was released. Now it sits with the public record. That matters. This is where the journey begins. Not with certainty, but with a signal, a shape in the record, a file that says something was there and we still need language for it. At number 14, the mystery starts to breathe a little more. A spherical UAP over Afghanistan, moving in and out of the clouds. There's something about cloud cases that gets under your skin. Clouds give the sky depth. They create layers. They make the object feel like it belongs to a real space, not just a dot on the screen. And when something appears to move in relation to those layers, your mind starts building the scene in 3 dimensions. Picture it for a second: a monitored environment, a military context, an object moving through the sky, not as a story told decades later, but something recorded and preserved. For years, people have said, "Show us the files." Now the files are here. And the strange thing is, they don't make the mystery any smaller. They make it feel closer. This case is not number 14 because it gives us the answer. It's here because it helps set the atmosphere. It tells us the second release is not about isolated lights. It's about objects moving through real environments, about real places under serious observation. And as we go deeper, the environments start to matter more and more. At number 13, we move from appearance into behaviour. A spherical UAP with erratic movement. And this is where the energy shifts, because one strange object can make you curious, but strange movements make you lean forward. Movement is where the unknown starts feeling alive. Not alive as in biological, we're not jumping there yet, but alive as in active, responsive, unpredictable. Something that does not sit neatly inside the normal box. When you hear erratic movement, your brain immediately starts asking questions. Was it darting? Was it changing direction? Was it moving in a way that made the operator pause? Was there something in its behavior that made this file worth keeping? That's what we're tracking here. Not just objects, but behavior. Not just shapes, but patterns. And if this story eventually leads into something bigger, beings, intelligence, consciousness, interdimensional possibilities, behavior is one of the first breadcrumbs. Because intelligence is not only about what something is, it's about what something does. So this case matters because it starts to whisper a bigger question. Are we looking at debris in the system, or are we looking at activity? Number 12 takes us into a serious place, AFSOC, Kabul, a monitored military environment. This is where context starts doing the heavy lifting, because the same unknown object seen in an empty field and seen in a military operational environment does not feel the same. One is strange, the other carries weight. And I want you to imagine this as part of a much bigger archive. Not just one file, but file after file, decade after decade, where unknowns keep appearing near systems built to watch the world carefully. That's what makes this topic so compelling. It's that places designed to detect, track, monitor, and defend have repeatedly had to deal with things that do not fit cleanly into the expected picture. And when that happens, the mystery stops being only philosophical. It becomes operational. What was seen, who saw it, what was tracked, why was it preserved, what did the people in the room think when it happened? Those are some of the questions that make this case feel like another door opening. At number 11, a familiar shape returns. Tic Tac. That phrase carries history now. It carries memory. It carries weight as one of the most famous modern UAP cases ever discussed publicly. And even when the phrase is being used descriptively, it still activates something in the viewer because we've heard it before. That matters because repeated language becomes part of the pattern. Tic Tac, sphere, cigar, formation, over water, near military operations, infrared, hot, unknown. These are not just random words. They're all words that are becoming commonplace now around this mystery. And this is where the long-time followers will feel it. You've seen this before. Not this exact case, maybe, but the shape of the conversation. The same categories keep returning in different places, different years, different platforms, different environments. That's why this case ranks here. Not because one label solves it, but because it adds to the developing language of disclosure. And every serious story needs a language before it becomes understood. Before we keep going, I want to pause for a second, because this is where you come in. I know a lot of you are not casual viewers. You've been following UFOs, UAP, disclosure, consciousness, ancient mysteries, spiritual experiences, abduction accounts, government secrecy, and the hidden edges of reality for years. Some of you have been watching this story longer than I've been making videos. So I want your eyes on this, not just as viewers, but as part of the investigation. What pattern are you already seeing? Is it the shapes, the locations, the military environments, the water connection? The fact that this is slowly becoming official? Drop it in the comments as we go, because I want this episode to feel like we're sitting at the same table, looking at the same files, asking the same question. What is tomorrow starting to look like? And if you're new here, don't just subscribe for one video. Stay for the journey, because this is exactly the kind of story Existence Unknown was built for. Now let's keep going, because number 10 takes us back to the water. At number 10, the ocean enters the room again. A spherical UAP pulsing over water. There is something about water cases that feel different. The sky is mysterious enough, but the ocean adds another layer entirely. It's darker, deeper, less accessible, more hidden, and if the UAP story begins connecting seriously with water, then we are no longer just looking up, we're looking down as well. That changes everything, because the ocean is not an empty space, it's a world beneath our world. It covers most of the planet, it hides what we cannot easily reach. It has military importance, biological mystery, ancient mythology, and still so many unknowns. So when a release case places a strange spherical object over water, apparently pulsing, it naturally invites the bigger question. What if the mystery is not only above us? What if part of the story has always been beneath us? This is a case stepping stone. It prepares us for the deeper water lane later in the countdown. It reminds us that disclosure may not be a sky story. It may be a multi-domain story. And once that idea enters your mind, it's very hard to put back. Hold on to that ocean thought, because number 1 takes it further than any other case in this release. At number 9, what matters is time. A longer duration Mission UAP case gives us something a short clip rarely can. The chance to sit with the mystery. And that sounds simple, but it matters. Because when the footage lasts longer, your mind has time to move past the first shock. You stop just reacting. You begin studying. You start asking what changes, what stays the same, what the operators might have been watching, and why the event mattered enough to be saved. That is what serious disclosure needs. Not just flashes, not just fragments. Time. context. Because if this leads where many people think it leads, into non-human intelligence, deeper physics, consciousness, and maybe realities layered around or through our own, then tiny fragments will never be enough. We'll need sequences. We'll need timelines. We'll need the data that lets us watch the phenomenon behave. This case matters because it feels like a request from the future. Give us more. More before the clip, more after the clip, more data around the clip, more of the world that surrounds the moment. Because the mystery is not only the object, it's in the event. At number 8, we get into something even better than one longer look. We get a sequence. And sequences are powerful. And sequences are powerful because they begin to feel like chapters. One clip is a spark, a sequence is a pattern trying to form. When you can compare related clips, the question becomes deeper. Does the object remain consistent? Does the behavior repeat? Does the sensor pattern change? Does the case become clearer, or does it become stranger? This is where release number 2 starts feeling less like a random folder and more like an unfolding map. And that's important because of the future of this topic may depend on pattern recognition. Not one case that carries everything, not one perfect smoking gun, but a chain of cases that together begin to point in the same direction. That's how big truths often arrive, not as one lightning bolt, as a pattern you can no longer ignore. This sequence earns its place because it tells us to stop asking only, what is this one thing? And starts asking, what keeps returning? And from here the countdown gets stronger. The next 7 cases feel less like isolated files and more like the story beginning to show its outline. At number 7, the story gives us a formation over water. And formation changes the emotional temperature immediately. A single object asks, what is it? Multiple objects ask, are they together? This is a very different question, because once several objects appear in the same frame, the mind starts searching for relationship, spacing, direction, timing, arrangement, coordination. And whether that coordination is real or only apparent, the question itself pulls us into deeper territory. If these are disconnected objects, the case is still interesting. If they're moving together, the case becomes something else. And again, we are over water. That reputation is no longer just background, it has become part of the episode's pulse. Sky, water, spheres, movement, formation, military collection, official release. This is the mosaic forming in front of us, and when you step back, the individual tiles begin to matter less than the picture they may be building. Number 6 brings us to speed, instant acceleration. And even just saying that phrase changes the room. Because if shape is the body of the mystery, movement is its heartbeat. This is where possibility starts widening. If something is recorded moving in a way that feels beyond familiar performance, the question naturally becomes, what kind of system could do that? Is it human technology, unknown physics, a sensor effect? Something operating with the principles that we don't yet understand. Is this where the imagination lights up? Because advanced movement has always been one of the great signatures in UFO history. Sudden acceleration, sharp directional change, no obvious propulsion, motion that seems to ignore what we expect from normal aircraft. And even if some of these performance cases survive deeper analysis, they could point towards a future where our understanding of propulsion, gravity, inertia, and even space itself needs to expand. That is the wonder here. Not just what is that object, but what does that object know about reality that we don't? And if you think that sounds big, stay with me, because the final cases move from performance into public memory, deep history, and the ocean itself. At number 5, we reach one of the most visually haunting cases in the release, the NAG UAP. This is one that makes people pause, not because it hands us a clean answer, but because it triggers the ancient part of the brain that looks at something unfamiliar and whispers, "What am I seeing?" Some will see an unusual object. Some will see a distorted form. Some will see something almost humanoid. And that reaction matters, because if this story eventually leads towards beings, entities, or intelligence that does not fit our normal categories, then public interpretation is going to be part of the journey. This is where disclosure becomes psychological. Not just what is released, but how we process what is released. Because imagine a future where the files no longer show only objects. Imagine a future where the conversation begins moving towards occupants, encounters, consciousness efforts, communication, or forms of intelligence that do not behave in the way humans expect intelligence to behave. Would we be ready? Would we recognize it? Would we explain it away because it feels too strange? That's why this case ranks so high. It invites us to sit with the discomfort of the unfamiliar. And sometimes the unfamiliar is the first shape tomorrow takes. Number 4 is one of the most visually compelling cases in the second release. UFOs in formation over the Persian Gulf. This is the kind of case that feels cinematic because it gives the viewer structure. Multiple lights, a serious region, an overwater environment, a visual arrangement that invites replay. And that matters because people need to see something they can hold in their mind. A file can be important, a document can be powerful, but a formation gives the imagination something to build around. Picture it, objects over dark water holding some kind of relationship in the frame, recorded by systems tied to a world that would normally keep this kind of material locked away. And now it is here, in the public, waiting for us to decide what we think it means. This is where the episode starts feeling like more than a countdown. It starts feeling like a preview of a future where we may have to think seriously about the activity in our skies and oceans that does not fit the old world view. And that is what our audience already feels. You feel it, I feel it. Something about the story is moving. But the top 3 are where the second release stops feeling just like footage and starts feeling like history, memory, and the next domain of disclosure. At number 3, we step back in time. Sandia Base, 1948 to 1950. And suddenly release number 2 is no longer just about modern footage. It becomes a time machine. This is one of the most powerful parts of the release because it reminds us that the mystery did not begin with modern sensors, modern drones, or modern internet culture. The story reaches back into the early Cold War, into sensitive locations, into the birth of the modern UFO era. And when you place old files besides new videos, something happens. The mystery gains depth. It stops feeling like a recent glitch in the system and starts feeling like a long-running signal. That is where our wonder lives. Because if unknowns were approaching around sensitive sites decades ago, and unknowns are still appearing around monitored military environments now, then we are not just looking at scattered incidents. We may be looking at a thread that has been moving through human history while we were all arguing over whether the thread existed at all. And this is where the story can begin to touch the bigger questions. What if this has always been there? What if our ancestors saw parts of the same mystery and gave it different names? What if folklore, religion, beings, lights in the sky, visitors, spirits, angels, demons, crafts, entities, and interdimensional theories are not all the same thing, but fragments of humanity trying to describe contact with something beyond its current understanding? That does not mean we collapse everything into one answer. It means we finally allow the question to be big enough. Number 2 is the Lake Huron Shootdown. And this one feels different because the public remembers it. This was not a forgotten file sitting quietly in an archive. This was part of a moment where people looked up from their normal lives and wondered what was happening above North America. Objects were being tracked. Military aircraft were involved. The story entered through the news cycle. People felt the uncertainty in real time. And now the second release brings us back to that memory. That matters because the public memory is part of disclosure. Most people don't follow every case file, but they remember the moments that felt strange. They remember when the official explanations felt incomplete. They remember when something in the air made the world feel bigger and less settled than what it did the day before. The Lake Huron case carries that feeling. It reminds us that it's not just theory. There have been moments where governments had to respond to unknowns publicly. Moments where the mystery came close enough to interrupt the normal world. And if those releases bring us back to those moments, we may start seeing a different map of recent history. Not the history that we were told in the headlines, the history behind the headlines. That is why this case ranks as number 2, because it connects the archive to a moment people lived through. But even this does not take number 1, because the top case points somewhere deeper, below the sky, into the ocean, into a domain that could change the entire conversation. Number 1 is DOW-UAP-PR067. Multiple Spherical UAP. USO language. Near a submarine, in and out of the water. This is the case that feels like a doorway, because it brings together so many of the themes that make the second release feel different. Multiple objects, maritime environment, submarine context, water interaction, trans-medium possibility. The overlap between UAP and USO. This is where the old picture starts to crack. For decades, the UFO conversation has told us to look up. Watch the skies, search the stars, scan the horizon. But what if part of the answer has always been below the horizon? What if the ocean is not only just the setting of some cases, but part of the mystery itself? The ocean is the perfect place for secrets. It's vast, deep, difficult to monitor, filled with darkness, pressure, and silence. It's closer than space, but in some ways still almost as alien to us. And now place multiple spherical objects near a submarine with in and out of the water language inside an official release. You don't need to force the magic is already there. This is the evidence of a mystery touching a domain we barely understand. And if future releases continue moving towards USO cases, then the conversation will expand beyond a craft in the sky into something much bigger. Air, sea, space, consciousness, beings, intelligence, then reality itself. This is why this case is number one, because it doesn't just ask us what is flying, it asks what may be moving through the boundaries of our world. And if tomorrow looks different from yesterday, this may be one of the first places we saw the outline. So what does the second release really show us? It shows us momentum. It shows us that the archive is still opening. It shows us that the mystery has categories, shapes, behaviors, locations, domains, historical roots, public memory. It shows us that the story is no longer hidden behind one locked door. Now there are doors everywhere. And the deeper question is not whether every case gives us the final answer. The deeper question is what kind of world these cases are preparing us to imagine. Because if the official record keeps expanding, the conversation may move very quickly. First with objects, then technology, then origin, then occupants, then beings, then communication, then consciousness, then the nature of reality itself. That may sound enormous, but let's be honest, that is where the topic has always been heading. People do not follow UFO disclosure because they want to know what shape a dot was. They follow it because somewhere deep down, they know the answer could change everything. It could change science, it could change religion, it could change history, it could change what we think we are. It could change whether consciousness is just something inside the brain or something connected to a much larger reality. And that is the wonder we should not be afraid of. Because wonder is not lying. Wonder is what happens when evidence opens a door and we're brave enough to walk through it. And if you want to sit with this release after the episode, grab the second release Decoded companion pack. It has the full countdown, the case links, a QR code that you can scan for direct access, visual reconstructions, and my deeper read on why each one matters. You can find it at existenceunknown.com in the links section. Use it like a field guide. Open the evidence, follow the trail. Don't just watch the investigation from the outside. Be a part of it. Now I want your take. Not just alien or not alien. I want the bigger answer. Where do you think this is heading? Is it A, advanced human technology? B, non-human intelligence? C, is it going to be interdimensional or consciousness-linked phenomena? Or D, a reality shift bigger than any single explanation that we can understand? Drop either A, B, C or D in the comments and tell me why. And if it's something different altogether, put your own answer in there. And if one case made you feel something, name it, because that matters too. Sometimes the case that stays with you is the one your mind knows to keep watching. And if this episode gave you that feeling, that little spark that says something is changing, and if this episode gave you that feeling, that little spark that says something's changing, hit like, share it with someone who's ready for this conversation, and be sure to subscribe to Existence Unknown. Don't just subscribe for a one-time ride, stay for the journey. Here's where I land. The second release feels like evidence of movement. Not final answers, movement. And movement matters because stories like this do not change the world all at once. They change it by shifting what people are ready to consider. A few years ago, many people still laughed at the idea that governments were sitting on serious UFO material. Now we're looking at official releases, military clips, historical files, congressional pressure, whistleblower claims, and a public that's no longer satisfied with being told to move along. That is not nothing. That is a cultural shift. And I think a lot of you feel it too. This is no longer only about whether something strange is in the sky. It's about what that strangeness may reveal about our place in reality. If there are beings, what are they? If there's intelligence, how does it think? If there is a consciousness link, what does it say about us? If there is an interdimensional layer to this, how much of reality have we actually misunderstood? And if the ocean is part of this story, how much of it has been happening right here on Earth, hidden in plain sight, while humanity kept looking upward? That is the tomorrow I want you to imagine. Not a tomorrow built on fear. A tomorrow built on wonder. A tomorrow where the world becomes bigger, stranger, more connected, more alive. A tomorrow where old boundaries between science, spirituality, history, and mystery start to blur. That is why we do this. Not because we already have every answer, because the questions are finally big enough. If more files open, we'll be here. And if the story moves towards beings, consciousness, dimensions, or something even stranger, we'll be here for that too. Because Existence Unknown is not here for one episode. We're here for the journey, and I'm glad you're here with us. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and watch it after this, because release number 1 sets the foundation for everything we've just walked through. Then keep going through the other disclosure and non-human intelligence episodes on the channel, because this story is not happening in isolation. Each release is another piece. Each case is another tile. And together we're building the map. And remember, don't just subscribe for a one-time ride. Stay for the journey. I'm Mike. I'll see you next time. And make sure you stay curious and share what you know with those that are happy to listen. I'll see you next time.